Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the D's have recorded 2 wins in a row for the first time since May last year, and the mood is high on Demonland. Joining me tonight is long-time Demonlander George. Good evening, George. How are you?
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, everyone. And wasn't that one of the most enjoyable games of football for a Melbourne footy club supporter since at least the 2018 finals?
Oh, absolutely. And this week the heart rate didn't get too high. I didn't get any alerts on my watch this week, which is a good thing. So I'm glad that didn't cause me too many issues. Also joining us tonight is long-time caller to the show, but first-time host. Good evening, Bin Man. How are you?
Good evening, Andy and everyone out there in Demonland land.
Demonland land.
Thanks. It's a good way to end the weekend is a win, and it certainly sets up for a good week, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and there'll be plenty to talk about tonight. And it always is more enjoyable to talk about the wins than it is the losses. Certainly a lot more positives, and I think we'll get straight into it. But first, we love hearing from Demonlanders, so if you'd like to join our program tonight to discuss any of the topics that we talk about, as Binman has in the past, you can give us a call on 039016 3666. That's 039016 3666, or Skype us at Demonland31. If you're listening to the show live, come join us in the chat room. You can ask questions, post comments, head over to demonland.com/podcast. If you're listening to this at your leisure via SoundCloud on demonland.com during the week, or via an Apple or Android podcasting app, give us a subscribe. And you can receive podcasts when a new show drops. Don't forget to leave us a favourable review to help more Demonlanders or more Demon supporters find us. We're also on Spotify and Stitcher. Go to demonland.com, find the preferred links to your preferred method of listening. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Demonland31, Twitter at Demonland, Instagram at Demonland31, or search us on YouTube, Demonland Podcast. If you just love talking about the Ds 24/7 all year round like we do, come to demonland.com, join up, chat with us and other Ds fans about this great club, and you can chat about all these great victories that we've had in the past couple of weeks and hopefully into the future. So, boys, we'll get started. As George mentioned, it certainly was our best game since the 2018 semi-finals and the whole block of games leading up to the finals. So good to win all 4 quarters of a footy game. George, you might know this. When was the last time we won 4 quarters of footy?
I wouldn't have any idea. You'd have to ask someone like Super Mercado. He's an expert on those sort of things.
Yeah, I was thinking about it without having any stats in front of me, and I was even the games we won last year. I'm not sure if we won all 4 quarters.
Yeah, it's a bit sad, isn't it? An indictment on our season last year, because that we can't remember when we actually did win every quarter. It's probably been such a long time now. But that was a nice one to do so.
Yeah, I was thinking back. It might have been even. I'm not sure about the game in West Coast that we won, but maybe the GWS game the next week might have been one where we won all 4 quarters. Might have been the last one. B-Man, any ideas? How has your stats?
Not so great, but given you can't contradict me, we didn't. The 2018 semi, were we? Did we win each of those quarters? We didn't, did we? They came back in one of those quarters.
Yeah, I think the third quarter they might have beaten us in the third. I'm not positive, but anyway, someone might get back to us and tell us. But before we go into individual players, I'd like to point out a few of the team / game plan things that I noticed. I thought the ball movement was great. When we had the ball in hand and were on the move, I thought we ran really well in waves of players down the field. We had a really good mix of that play on / chaos ball when it was appropriate, and also had the ability to slow the game down when we needed to. So credit for the coaching staff for working that mix out. Big man, what did you think of the game plan part of our game?
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic, and it's really interesting with the game plan. If you think 2018 is obviously our high watermark in the last few years, and that style of the move it forward at all costs, get it forward half football contest out was the template we used that year. Although you might remember from about halfway through 2018, we were less aggressive with our zone, and we set up deeper. And we, from that point, I forget the exact numbers, but I think from round 12 or something to the end of the home and away season, we conceded the least number of points of any side in the AFL. And even last year, we never really got smashed last year. A couple of sort of maybe 6-7 goal losses, but defensively we're pretty strong, and we definitely set up deeper. But it seems to me that tactically they've sort of moved to a model where they've introduced a bit more tempo football. They've still got that, Goodwin's core is that contest out forward half football. And as you say, I think what the big similarity for me to 2018 was that running in waves of 2 or 3 players, with a player either side of the ball carrier that can be given off, and often was, and getting those goals out the back. When was the last game that we got 4 or 5 goals out the back of, a Joe the Goose kick like one Wiedemann got?
Yeah, I can't remember the last time sort of that happened on a consistent basis. I think we've been trying to do that. It just hasn't worked, just because everything's fallen down all over the field. But yeah, you're right. We got back to playing the way we want to play, but also with that ability to slow it down and not just go, not have the tachometer as they were annoyingly talking about it last week's game. That wasn't going, we sort of measured when to use that. And as the boys sort of play a bit more together, hopefully, it works out well. There was a real desperation about the way we played, that even when we couldn't grab clear possession of the ball, we tried to knock the ball forward, and it seemed like that sort of was happening over and over again. And I think as the games go on, maybe that'll work more in our favour, but it was certainly good to see.
Absolutely. The thing that was striking in that first quarter is, even when they got their first goal and they missed an absolute sitter to the young player, I think he was a first gamer, hit the post from 30 metres out, would have put a couple of goals up. But even, I don't think we scored our first goal for 15 minutes or maybe 10 minutes of that quarter perhaps. We still looked the better team, and we still looked, as you say, really ferocious. We were really hitting them hard, and it just felt, even, I guess it seems a bit silly, but even before we'd scored our first goal, it looked like we were ready to really get into them. And I was sort of confident right from that moment, actually. Well,
again, it was that frustrating thing where we had more inside 50s at that stage. I think they had only gone inside 2 or 3 times, and they had managed to score, albeit they had kicked a couple of points to go along with Gunston's goal. But we had more of the play. We'd once again got it into the forward line. We just couldn't score. So I thought we were in for one of those frustrating days, but luckily it didn't pan out. I thought, George, what do you think to our disposal? On the whole, I thought it was much better. Lowering of the eyes, the delivery into the forward 50 was much better. Still a few disposal issues present. A couple of, errant handballs here and there, and a couple of dinky kicks. But on the whole, it's been a lot better the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the important thing is the structural changes that Goodwin has embraced since certainly that game against Geelong. And it comes back to a couple of simple things, I think, that Craig Jennings had proposed. Firstly, was setting the defensive structures further back down the field, not leaving those holes that were so evident in the Geelong game. But there's a couple of flow-on effects from that sort of thing. Also, two genuine forwards enables Max to go into that back line, and we saw how many times he took intercept marks to deny their opportunities. The back structures are nice and solid. The introduction of Oscar into the back line, I think, has made a huge difference. And all of these things, all of the attacking moves and the runs through the middle and the cheap and easy goals that we were getting were all coming from further up the field. Our ability to actually get our hands on the ball at that half-back line and deny them and then mount some really serious attacks. So I think there's the whole stack of things that flow from that. You've got plenty of time and vision when you haven't got any opposition players in your face all the time. So the kicking becomes better. It's just one thing after the other as a result of a few simple changes. And I think if we stick to similar sorts of plans, that we'll see a lot more of that, which is entertaining football to watch for all of us. Apart from the fact that we win the game, so that's even better.
I also thought, our defensive zones are working a lot better. Best I've seen it this year and in a long while. And we can go more into the defence later on when we sort of talk about individual players. Our forward line pressure, in fact, the pressuring and tackling all over the field was absolutely immense. And Jack Viney can take a bow for leading by example. It was just our ferocity was great to see, Bin Man. I'm sure you'll agree with me there.
Absolutely. Just on that, I think that you're spot on with the defensive zones, and I think that sort of goes to my point about midway through that 2018, Goodwin really focused on that zone and working it out. And again, as much as last year was just a shocker, and as I made the point often enough, was that to me that the large part of that was injury related. We never got blown out, and they still work very hard on that zone. And you look at the strongest teams now; they just don't let opposition score. And I think that really is the sort of, I guess that's the modern linchpin of footy at the moment, isn't it? That zone and defensive work that just makes it, impossible to score. And, with the kicks to Gawn, geez, you'd be just ropeable if you're a Hawthorn fan. But the thing with that is that we just didn't allow them it's a bit hard to see on the television, but, we didn't allow them to cross. We didn't allow them to switch across to the fat side. We covered those short kicks and we basically forced them kicking down the line. I mean, surely they wouldn't have willingly wanted to kick it to Gawn all day. And just from there, I think that you can create that wall that they just, at one point in the fourth quarter, it just didn't look like they were going to score a goal. But as you say, a big part of that is that ferocious tackling. I think at one point it was 8 tackles inside 50 to 1 pretty early in the game. And we talked last week about the value of Cozzy and Hannon, and both of them were just sort of causing havoc down there. So I think that's the Melbourne game plan, the one wood, isn't it? That ferocity, and some of the tackling was just unbelievable.
I'll play devil's advocate here for a second because, look, there's no doubting that ferocity sort of put them off their game. But I reckon the opposition weren't much chop. So not saying we didn't play well, but how much of it is, the opposition playing badly? Like within about 10 minutes, we had stopped them playing the way that they wanted to play. And then after that, some of their ball movement was like our ball movement circa late 2000s, early 2010s, when they had no movement whatsoever. There were no leads, no options, but that's obviously we were sort of forcing that on them. The injury to O'Brien certainly didn't help them, but what are you going to do? That's just bad luck, and that can happen to any team. But how much of it was our pressure, us sort of shutting them down, and how much is it of them just not being much chop this year?
I think it's certainly the case that Hawthorn aren't much chop. I think McAvoy was the barometer of where they stand at the moment. He was just awful, but he's been awful in a couple of games this year. They were trying him down in the back line to fill a hole at one stage until Segler got injured. But it's just not the Hawthorn team of old. Burgoyne is suddenly slow, and he was caught to give us our first goal. Didn't see him for the match. I think that successfully, particularly from my perspective, they blanketed Smith with Brayshaw and Vandenberg on the wing. All of a sudden, there's no avenues that Hawthorn have traditionally used to get the ball down the field. And even when they get the ball down the field, there's no longer any Cyril Rioli up the other end, and no rough heads and of those ilk of players. So we're just seeing a shell of what Hawthorn used to be. But just as equally, we had to do the work to stop people like Smith and cut off those options, because they would readily have gone to their kick and hold sort of tactics, but we just didn't give them the option. They were forced to go down the line time and time again.
Yep.
So we contributed to it, but they're only a shell of the side that they used to be, even from last year.
On that, I'd sort of make two contradictory points in some respects. Is I predicted before the game that that we'd have a good win, and that I think that we're sort of a 3 to 4 goal better side. But you've still got to do it, don't you? And so leaving that aside, the contradictory point is that no one else thought that out there in football land. So tips were pretty evenly split. And what I think is a pretty good barometer or a good gauge on a team's chances. They were slight favourites with the bookmakers for that game. So, my confidence aside, and I agree they're certainly not the side they were, but we never allowed them to get their rhythm. And it was a combination of tactically, I thought it was a really good game by Goodwin, who's had a good couple of weeks tactically. Physically, we just smashed them. Definitely hurt them having O'Brien. That really threw them, I think, in terms of their own structure. But, how often in the past have we said, we're up against a team we should win and we don't? And I think that we just never allowed them into the game. I think that model of chip around there's a weakness to it in that if you get 2 or 3 goals up on that model, then it's really hard for them to adjust. And that's exactly what happened. We were 2 goals up at the end of the first quarter, but it really felt like we were 3 or 4 goals up. And we soon were 3 or 4 goals up, not long into the second quarter.
Yeah. Yep. I'll move on to some individual efforts. First one's got to be Christian Petracca. Absolutely sublime. His disposal was so much better than it was last week. Some of his bullish acts to extract the ball, burst through packs, giving the don't argues and just leaving opponents in his wake, with his bursts of strength and speed, is just bellissimo to see. He just keeps going to another level in 2020, and he's well on his way to an All-Australian this year if he keeps that up. He
was immense, wasn't he? And I was trying to think, I was talking to a friend. I can't recall a player similar to Petracca at Melbourne. And it's a bit of a stretch, but Rhino Richards was the last player with his sort of combination of speed and power. And Rhino Richards wasn't as good a player as Petracca is, but we haven't had too many of those. I guess haven't been too many in the AFL, to be honest. But that combination of power, strength, but also his ability to read the play. I think he's just terrific at sort of intercept and knowing how to sort of put himself into spots where he gets the ball.
Yeah, I'll ask both of you. There were comments by Shane Crawford about him being one of the best players, certainly the most informed players in the competition right now. And I'd say in terms of right now, definitely those comments are bang on. I don't love the pressure that those comments sort of bring, but I love that Track's now in that conversation. I don't love the comparisons yet to Dusty, just because Dusty's got sort of a mantelpiece of some silverware and medals and trophies and all that to sort of back up his recent achievements. But I love that he's in that conversation. I hope he can sort of match Dusty in the coming years. George?
Yeah, I have to agree with a bit, man. It's been a long time since this club's had a player who can rip a game apart.
Yep.
And he's exactly that, and that's exactly what he did on the weekend in conjunction with Max, of course. But, boy, he just ripped that game apart. And the last player that I can remember who had that capability was David Schwartz. Different players, but both that ability just to completely turn a game off their own individual efforts. It was very, very pleasing to see, and I think that it was really that last mark that he took in front of Sicily. Now Sicily would have demolished anybody else in that situation, but Tracker just leaned back on him and just gave him nothing. So, and you could just see the frustration in Sicily, apart from the fact that they were losing badly. You could just see the frustration of Sicily in that circumstance, because he knew he was playing on someone seriously good.
Yeah, I think he thought the ball might have gone over his head, and Track just found that extra stretch to get it. A couple of important statistics on Track: the 29 disposals, 16 contested, the 1 goal, the 3 goal assists, and what's more impressive is the 14 score involvements. That's just immense. I don't really follow that statistic too much, but whenever it sort of pops up, I really take notice, and that's just incredible. I would love to know sort of what. How often that happens, what players like Dusty, because I don't follow that stat, would love to see what they get at their best as well. I'm not saying that they don't, but pretty impressive.
He's contested stats were through the roof as well. He's got
16.
I looked today at his stats, and he's up. I think he's averaging 24, nearly 25 possessions a game, up from 21 last year. And you've got to remember the
it's shorter games.
Shorter game, 16-minute quarter, so 20% less game time.
Yeah.
Last year, he played 70% forward, 30% in the midfield. It's exactly the opposite this season. He averaged 0.9, just under a goal a game last year. He's already 1.1 this year. I mean, he's just in a rare form, and he's the sort of player with his strength. I mean, you couldn't really tag him out of the game because he just goes. He's going through tackles at the moment in the way that. Maybe Dangerfield can and Martin, when he's up and going, can, but not many other players can sort of break through at the speed he can.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I think Petracca's done is he's improved his kicking dramatically. You recall last year and the year before, particularly, he had that really high ball drop, and he would have struggled. With the goal that he kicked from just on the 50-metre mark this week and the one from just outside last week. In previous years, he would have struggled with that with his ball drop, but he's changed that for the better, and he got up both of those scores quite easily. But just as equally was that absolute worm burner that he kicked to Wiedemann in the second quarter. That was something spectacular to watch on its own. It's from 50 metres to absolutely drill it down Wiedemann's throat from that distance, just above. Barely a metre off the ground, was just spectacular to watch.
It wasn't,
and not even off a step. He didn't have a step. He just sort of pivoted it on his foot. He sort of looked. He obviously knew that Wiedemann was in the square and pivoted, and just punched that ball. And obviously had to clear Frawley. And that was something else. He did one later in the game, which probably didn't get as much attention because the game was done and dusted. I mean, the timing of that goal was fantastic because it sort of kept the momentum going. It was, I think, only in the second quarter, wasn't it? But the last one he kicked to Fritter was just unbelievable. He was on the boundary. He was under pressure from the fella behind him tackling him, and he hit a pass to Fritsch, who was running directly towards the goal. He had 2 Hawthorn players he was running towards, and somehow or other he weighted it so well that Fritsch hit the ball without even breaking stride and straight into an open goal. It was just unbelievable.
And the one that he did to Wiedemann, I don't even know how he knew Wiedemann was there, because it didn't even look like he even looked in that direction before he got the ball or once he got it. So just incredible. We'll move on to Gawney. Perfect captain's game. Dominated all game in the ruck and in the marking all over the ground. Put on an absolute clinic for McAvoy. 22 disposals, 16 contested, 8 marks, 6 contested, and the 27 hit-outs, but also 2 of his own centre clearances, which he's just sort of growing in confidence, sort of even with the ground ball. You notice he picks up the ball a lot off the ground, so he's just absolutely immense as well. What I wanted to go ahead, Jude. You go.
Yeah, I think there's a very good reason why Gawn and Petracca were both given the top coaches votes for this week. It was just as equally a magnificent performance, and McAvoy up to this year has always troubled him. But I saw a couple of the midfield ruck contests where he just pushed McAvoy around like a rag doll, and that has certainly never happened before. This is a new Max Gawn, I think, that we're starting to see here, which could be very frightening for a few other ruckmen in the competition.
Who gets the 3 votes this week? Track got the perfect 10 coaches' votes. Max got the almost perfect 8 coaches' votes. If you're an umpire, bin man, who gets the 3 votes?
I have to say that was one of the more enjoyable discussions, sort of rolling around Demonland for yesterday and Sunday, and it's good. You've had a good win when you're working out who's going to get the 3 votes between 2 players. Personally, I'd give it to Gawn, and I wondered after the game on Sunday if that was the best game of footy I've seen a Melbourne player play. I haven't watched the replay. I've watched half of it now, and I think George makes a good point. McAvoy was pretty poor, actually, so perhaps that brings it down a notch. But if you think of impact, he just had an incredible impact. I know Petracca did as well, but I can't imagine that game without Gawn playing. It would have been a completely different game. Petracca as well, but more just it wouldn't have been as enjoyable if Track didn't play. I guess your point about the 14 scorer involvements perhaps contradicts that as well. But he was unbelievable, Gawn, and I haven't seen a ruckman like that, a game like that, since Gary Dempsey at his peak. His tap work was unbelievable, and it seems to me he's got fitter. And I don't know if I'm imagining it, but he also seems to be jumping higher. He gets down below his knees, he picks up balls, he reads the ball unbelievably well, and he's just clunking his marks at the moment. As I say, I'm struggling to think of a better game. There's been some individual ones. Farmer kicking 9 in the second half against Collingwood was a great individual game, and I think George is the last time I can recall a player being that dominant, but I'd give him the 3 votes.
Lyon kicking 10 goals in 3 quarters as well is up there too. In a final. Jack Viney, this is the Viney we want to see week in, week out, an absolute tackling beast. His pressure that he applies is enormous. You wouldn't want him on your tail. He's a lot more measured as well with his disposing of the ball, really lowering the eyes. I think he's took the criticism on board that probably I think it was after the Geelong game when sort of the focus was on the Ds and our disposal. Really well measured game. Went in and out a bit, but this, again, another fantastic game, and that's what we want to see from him.
I was impressed also with Viney's kicking. I think the first kick that he gave to Fritsch, which must have been 50 metres at least, but it hit Fritsch on the right on the chest amongst a couple of other Hawthorn players, and I thought I haven't seen Viney kick that well since he's been at the club. So maybe there's more improvements being made outside what's visible to us at the game itself. But yeah, he was much more confident about the way he's approaching and delivering the ball. So all positives.
That was a spectacular kick, and important too. I thought he was really valuable, and his want, I guess. He was really I think he's been great this year generally with his leadership, actually. But that kick was a beauty, and I was just on that. I was amazed that Fritter didn't get a 50 for all he pushed him straight back afterwards. But my disappointment of the day actually was that he didn't kick that goal at the beginning of the fourth quarter. After that series, a beautiful tap. I think he got the ball, flipped it to Petracca. Petracca waited and he ran forward. Was that the one where someone was on his back and he threw him off? And he had a shot from just outside 50 that missed to the left. That just would have, I reckon, if he got that goal, I can't see, perhaps it was the beginning of the third quarter. It was the beginning of the third quarter. We might have won that game by 10 goals if that had gone through.
Yeah, I think I said in the game day thread that would have been an absolute goal of the year. It was fantastic. We've got a question from the chat room. Engorged Onion says, gentlemen, regarding Viney or all the midfield, is it coach or self-directed approach to change his kicking? Either of you want to take that? I mean, we don't know.
We would have no idea. But yeah,
what I'd say
certainly
he
go ahead, B-Man, you go, and then George.
Sorry, George. That's all right. Yeah, I was going to say there was clearly a shift in the Gold Coast game in terms of the whole team being more measured with their kicking and slowing down a bit. And Viney seems to have slowed down a bit in terms of, and maybe that's a psychological thing, and someone I think a lot happens where Goodwin gets criticised because you see the evidence of it not working, for instance. But a lot of the things that do work, perhaps you just don't see the evidence, and that might be a really good example of it. He might have, good coaching is working, man management, and he might have found a way to help Viney slow down his sort of thinking and not be quite so bull at a gate. And that kick he kicked, ironically, his best kick prior to that one to Fritter was on his right foot to Petracca against the Suns, and that was a function of him slowing down and looking at his options forward. So, I wonder whether technique doesn't improve, but decision-making can come. Right?
Yeah. George, anything to add on that?
No. Apart from if the technique changes, if the decision making changes, sometimes your technique improves. It just looks better because you're doing a better job with the time that you've got available, the time you make. Instead of kicking it up in the air in hope, take that extra half a second and put it down someone's throat. And people think you're a fantastic kick suddenly, but you may not actually be kicking any better. It's just you're making the correct decisions in the first place. So may there be more of this sort of thing.
The other factor with the kicking too, I think, is that there's been noticeably less kicks to that 30 metres out directly in front, which even if you get it there, it looks terrible with the opposition market, doesn't it? And so it's not always necessarily a function of a bad kick. It's just that bad decision to put it into that one spot. There's 6 opposition marking for defenders. So, I think that credit where it's due for across the board, actually.
Engorged Onion says, nice response, gents. If you do want to join us, if you're listening live, demonland.com/podcast, you can ask a question like Engorged Onion just did, or you can give us a call 03 9016 3666 or Skype us at Demonland31. We'll move on to Clary. I thought he improved as the game went on. I think he's getting better at choosing when to handball and when to kick. A couple of his disposals were shockers. There was a dinky kick in the middle of the ground, and there was that handball to a stationary Max Gawn who wasn't even looking. But he just adds to that midfield that just seems to be purring along at the moment. Bin Man, Clary, thoughts on him?
Yeah, look, it was great to see him get some value out of his effort, because I think his effort's been there this year. It's a bit what we were saying with the combination of I don't think his kicking technique is great either. He tends to helicopter it a bit, and his decision making has been a little bit sort of off in the last year as well, but this year. But I thought someone's got in his ear and said, we want you to get the ball forward a lot more, and maybe just asked him to focus on that. And with that change, I think he's a lot more damaging, even if he does helicopter. If he helicopters at 60 metres down the park, it clears the congestion, and he gets some value for his effort, because there's one thing you can't sort of knock his effort. And the other thing that there has been a knock on him is his defensive running, and that's something it's quite hard to see on telly, but he seemed to be really working hard. He's not the quickest player, but he seemed to be working hard defensively with his running, so that's terrific.
Yeah, I must agree with the thing you mentioned about on the TV. That's the one thing that I've really missed not being at the games. Obviously missed not being at the games in general, but the fact that you cannot see what's happening around the field, and that's what I like about being at a game live, particularly at Demons games, because you get to see what else is sort of happening, what the options are upfield or behind the play, and you obviously don't get that on TV. So hopefully we can get back to the footy one of these days and be able to sort of see that, because even when we're sort of talking about, sort of critiquing the game or talking about it, it sort of helps to see what was on offer up the field or to the side or behind the play, and also be able to see some of the gut running. Like I noticed on the replay when I watched, and I'll give a plug to KO, because it makes it really easy to rewatch the games. I don't know if either of you guys have a subscription to it, but it makes it easy. And I actually use the function, watching it in 1.5 speed. You can really get through the game a lot quicker.
And 16-minute quarters are down. So.
Yeah, I watched the game in 10 minutes.
And if we lose, you can go even faster.
Oh, you can just delete the app when you lose.
I watched that game on 7, and but then flipped over to KO at half time to see whether the Fox was on. and I can't recall if it was, but first time I've ever done this, but I watched 20 minutes or 15 minutes of that second quarter. So it was during the halftime break. So yeah, it was a good thing for KO. It was a good thing you can do on KO.
Yeah. Yes, George?
They can send us some sponsorship money now, can they?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Well, I got sucked into that $2, deal that we had earlier on, and then I got charged $25 the other day. Just added to
paid off. It's worth $25.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. I've just now got to get rid of Foxtel that I've been meaning to get rid of because don't really use it much.
While we're talking on Clary, do either of you think that the addition of Petracca into the midfield in particular this year has resulted in Clary having a lot more freedom? I've noticed that he's getting a lot more of the ball on the outside rather than him being the one with the head down over the ball trying to fight for it all the time.
I think that's been huge and really important for his game, and he's freed him up a bit. And I think the same is true of Viney, because Viney wasn't fit for a big part of last year and was in and out and not the sort of ferocious player he is this year. And I think that's a really good point, George, because he does look a little, perhaps that's why he's been a little bit more, being able to be a bit more damaging and offensive with his kicking. And it must help having a beast like Petracca actually getting the pill and feeding it to you rather than him being all the time. Yep. The other thing about Oliver, though, is the umpires hate him. He just never gets a free kick, and he seems to deserve quite a few, but perhaps that's my Melbourne bias.
It's going to be interesting when we start coming up against some opposition teams. We'll talk about the fixture that's been released, and we're playing a couple of the top of the ladder teams in the next few weeks. But it'll be interesting to see what they do in terms of matching up with our players, whether they go the tag on Petracca because he's sort of the flavour of the month. But that'll obviously free up, because it was always Clary that would sort of be the one to maybe get that hard tag. So it'll be interesting because you tag Petracca and you might let Clary off the leash. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting in the coming weeks. We'll move on.
Can I just make a point about tagging? Sure. And the point you made about not being at the game? And I would really miss watching the game, as I think I've said on the podcast before. I like to sit at the top. I always sit at the top of the Ponsford stand at the G. One of the reasons I like that is being able to have that high view across the ground and seeing the running patterns. But also seeing who's running with who. And I could not work out who was on Smith. I've AFL.com have got that AFL Pro. I'm not sure if either of you have ever used this.
No.
I watched all of Petracca's involvements for the game. It was like watching some sort of Demonland porn or something.
Wait, what is this?
It's on AFL.com. It's called AFL Pro.
Yeah.
And you can watch, I presume it's sold to the clubs. It's a function for the clubs. And you can watch, it has vision of every involvement in the game that a player has for every game for the last 4 years.
Really? Every player? You can put a player in, name in, and get their involvements?
Every involvement. And they're 1%, and not just their possessions, they're 1%ers, tackles, mistakes. So he might have had 40.
Are you talking about stats or vision of it?
Vision.
Wow.
It's called AFL Pro, and if you go to AFL.com, you need to be a Live Pass member, and if you're a Telstra member, speaking, you can do it. And so I've looked at a number of players, including him and Oscar McDonald, and I do it regularly. And I haven't done so much this year, but it's fantastic. So every single involvement, and I tried to work out who was on Smith. And for the life of me, I couldn't because it didn't look like there was any regular person. I thought it might have been Harms, and it wasn't. Harms was on someone else that looked like it, and it wasn't. Then I looked at Smith's footage, and I couldn't work it out. And the player who was closest to him most was Viney. And I wondered whether Viney spent a bit of time sitting on him, but it was incredibly difficult to work out who was on Smith. So, perhaps they didn't run anyone with him. Otherwise, there would have been footage of him being tackled all day.
I only saw Smith. Basically, he actually had very little involvement in the overall game, so perhaps that's why there was no little vision. But I only noticed that they had Vandenberg and or Brayshaw on his wing, certainly at centre bounces. So they might have varied that up a bit. But the fact that Smith had so little involvement in the game and so little effect, I think, was a real credit again to the coaching staff and whoever the players were that they had on him.
Well, I watched all of Smith's involvements for that reason, trying to work out who was on him, and I think 3 of his involvements were in one chain. One chain of handball that they scored in a junk time goal in the last quarter. So it was, I think he only had like 7 or 8 involvements for the whole game, and 3 were in one chain.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out. I'll move on to Harley Bennell. I'll declare it now. I love Harley Bennell. He uses the ball very well. He always seems to have more time. I said that last week. I did not have any doubt that he would kick that goal that he kicked when he was on the run. It was usually I'm like, closing my eyes, but I absolutely knew he'd kick that. Links up beautifully with the teammates. He's slotted in really nicely. Just love everything that does, and I don't even think we've seen a fraction of what he's capable of. And very excited about the prospect of having him in the team, and hopefully his body holds up, and it looks like so far it is.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He not only in the skill levels, but even at this stage, and you've got to remember he really hasn't played football for almost 3 or 4 years. This is only his first couple of games back, but I just like his involvement as well. The second goal, I think, was it Viney kicked the second goal. The other half of the tackle was Harley Bennell, who took I think it was O'Meara's hand out, didn't allow him to get away, and then Viney tackled the player. So I just like his work around the ground, even at this stage in a new team for him. His vision is just superb. That pass of his when he was sort of free at 50 coming into the 50, and he passed it off to Pickett, who was all on his own, was just brilliance, not just the delivery. And it was nice to see him getting that relatively easy goal from about the 35 on the run, all on his own, because he certainly put in the work in all sorts of other aspects of the game. He deserved it thoroughly.
A couple of things. That goal, I was speaking to a mate of mine who's a D's fan, and I said to him, I can't, 9 players out of 10, probably more if that's possible, of Melbourne, I would back 50-50 from that spot, even though he was under no pressure. And like Gord Junion has said in the chat room, and Andy as well, I had no doubt he was going to kick it. He balanced, took that 2 steps, and I had no doubt whatsoever he was going to get it. And that was a pretty unusual feeling to have about a Melbourne player running the goals. I have to say, I had to check what jumper he was wearing. The other thing, a few weeks ago, you guys were talking about maybe his physical commitment wasn't quite there, and he was subsequently dropped, and there was sort of, I don't know if that was code from Goody about the defensive running, or he does look a tiny bit hesitant going into sort of situations. But
I was going to say that.
For me, it's completely understandable given where he's come from, and we don't need another.
He's not an extractor of the ball. I'm not expecting him to get in and get under. He's not shirking contests, but I'm not. Not every player has to be that player that goes in and puts head first and gets the ball. As long as he's having the score involvement, he's contributing. In the games, which he is, I'm happy for him to play that receiver type role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's, as I said, for a fella who's been out of the game for the length of time he has, and who is, the last thing he wants to do is get injured, obviously. So it's sort of understandable to an extent that he'd be, not hesitant a tiny bit subconsciously. And, as you say, I want him delivering inside 50. I don't want him doing what Vandenberg does.
Yeah.
They're like yin and yang. He can tackle, but he couldn't hit the side of a barn in that game. He was terrible. His kicking was appalling. But that's not what we got Harley for, is it?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And I did watch him for that. And if you do watch the replay, you can see he sort of stays back a bit when the ball is there. But there are other players around who are going in, and I don't have a problem with that.
I think he seems a little tiny bit like he struggles to get down for that ball in front of him, and I wonder whether that's around his sort of nervousness about his calves.
Could be.
It's not just when he's thinking, it looks like he's worrying about contact. It seems like he just struggles with that, or maybe, you know, when you see a play coming back, like Lever when he was coming back from his knee, how they seem to hesitate wanting to do the turn. So I wonder whether that's a factor. The other thing about Harley Bennell was interesting. You said KO is on telly. You don't see the stuff that happens during the while the ads are on, obviously. But when I watch the replay of that game on KO, they have the full. They keep talking through the break, so they don't have the ads. And there are a couple of times they had a shot of him and Melksham, I think, talking during the halftime break, and the discussion looked about the game. And he's also really good with Cozzy, and so I think that perhaps his leadership might be something, quiet leadership that he's bringing to the club that maybe people hadn't expected from him or thought that he'd bring.
Yep. Agree, 100%. Speaking of Cozzy, he's just getting better and better. You know, that little shimmy and 360 blind handball on the 50-metre arc was just poetry in motion. He's kicked 2 goals this week. He's really, he's you know, not getting a heap of possessions, but he's sort of doing these like small acts. He's that pressure acts. He's always there. I think it's only a matter of time before he breaks the game open and does those Cozzy things that we've just seen glimpses of. But I'm very happy with him so far in his development.
Yeah, I used the term last week. I think he just terrifies the opposition defenders. They've got to be looking over their shoulder all the time when he's around. They're starting to get the message that when he's around, you've got to be careful, which is a great situation for us to be in. I was really impressed with that last goal that he kicked, though, that Bennell kicked to him. It was absolutely, utterly straight through the middle, no questions, it was just pure footballer class. And we're going to see some wonderful vision of him in the future. So it'd be nice to get back to real footy to see it live.
Yeah, to look around that kick, there were 3 Cozzy highlights for me in that game. Not that little dance step. That was kind of weird, actually. I don't know what he was.
He got rid of 2 players, though, didn't he, in that situation?
And got the ball to Jeddah, who almost kicked it to Wiedemann, who's almost took the mark, and we might have got a goal out of it. So yeah.
So the 3 highlights were that kick, and the camera angle was terrific. It, as you say, it just went dead straight, didn't it? Like completely like a die. And was it his rundown or attempted rundown? He seemed to be going so fast that he couldn't actually stop. When he tried to run down Day, he must have run 50 metres and made heaps of ground on him when Day was trying to run it out of the ground, and sort of slipped. He didn't hold the tackle, unfortunately, but it just would have been fantastic. And then the goal that he kicked, his first goal, it was sort of a weird scissor kick, but it went about 30 metres past the goal. Like it went high and long and just off a sort of half step, and he just really got great purchase on it. And he's. I think we're going to be enjoying him playing, as you say, George. I can't wait to see him at the G.
Yeah, so he's only had 6 possessions, but he's had 4 score involvements, which I think's important. And I'd just like to see him stick a few tackles. There were a few that he sort of got his hand onto them, but sort of didn't stick them. And I think that'll come with strength and experience. But very exciting. And
he'll get a few goals where he, like a couple of times he hit the pack and didn't quite come off, but he'll snag his share of crumbs where he just sort of comes through a pack and grabs it and kicks it, I think.
Exactly. That'll come. I'm not worried about that. And the other one that I was very impressed with, Jackson, he's starting to hit his straps, got a lot more of the ball, took a few strong marks, and even if he didn't clunk it, he was competing and getting the ball to the ground so that the small forwards could pounce. His rucking isn't quite there, but I think that's, a bit of strength, will come with the strength and experience. But I love his ability that if he doesn't win the ruck contest, he's able to still rove the ball, in those contests. And, I was excited by his game, and I'd like to see him get a few more games on the trot to find his feet. And we'll talk about this in a minute, about his selection next week, which might be interesting, particularly if T-Mac's fit. And we'll talk about Wiedemann next, and then we might bring the whole T-Mac thing into it. But Jackson, Binman, thoughts on his game?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like the first game, but better, obviously.
Yeah.
Didn't sort of, stats-wise, he wasn't super, amazing.
Yeah.
But like you, I wonder whether that was the whole sort of motivation in round one, was energy with Benell and Cozzy and Cozzy played that game, and Jackson. Round two, I should say. Round one. It is the energy he brings. He brings a real energy, and I have to say, we'll no doubt touch on it with selection next week. But Tom McDonald hasn't brought that energy, has he? It's not just the sort of his marking or whatever. It's I don't know. He's got an effervescence about him that must bring his teammates up a bit. And I really like the way he got up and down the ground. He was a problem for them because he was a match-up problem with his height.
Yeah.
And I think you're being a bit tough on him with his ruck. I reckon his ruck craft is actually really good. And if you watch him, he's really trying to work Palmer. And, I mean, he's certainly got the best ruckman in the league helping him there, hasn't he? So
I think it was more the like the boundary throw-ins where it's a bit more physical, body on body, not the one-on-one, not the centre of the ground ball-ups.
Well, his leap's so big in the centre of the ground that, it gives the opposition coaches a problem, because Gawn rests, what do you do? It's the time to rest your own ruckman with 16-minute quarters. There, you can't really run. You can run your ruckman all day, but you want to give him a chop out from Gawn. So the obvious thing to do is to correspond when he's resting. But can you afford to do that when you've got a fella who can jump over the top of all of your ruckman, let alone their second best ruckman?
Yeah. George, anything on you want to add on Jackson?
Not a great deal. I think, again, we can be excited about what we're seeing already. I was impressed the very first play involvement that he was in. He was going for a mark in a pack, and he hit that pack absolutely as hard as he could. And I thought, this kid's going to be trying from day one. There wasn't any holding back or being worried about his own welfare.
Yeah,
and that's a great sign to see in someone who's either a forward or a ruck. He's going to provide us with something special, and he's got the athleticism. That when he was involved in that link of handballs up the middle, and then the delivery into the forward line that we got. I can't remember who finished up on the end of it. It was just great to see. So, but as Binman said, having him as a proper backup ruck who can do other things as well on the ground. Our problem up to date has been when Max does go off, and we'll probably run into this more next year with longer quarters. We need someone who can ruck for a longer period of time, not just 2 or 3 minutes. And Jackson will be the one who can do that job, but also fill in a role in the forward line as well. That's going to be critical for us, I think, in the future. It's going to be very good for us.
Well, that's what I like about it. Like, we used to pull out, either a T-Mac or a Wiedemann, or even if you go back to Cam Pedersen, out of the forward line, but none of them were genuine rucks. And even though they could sort of hold their own, and Jackson will body on body be able to hold his own as he builds up his strength, but he's a genuine. He can play for the forward as a forward, and look, there were a few times where he didn't quite get that mark, but soon he's going to start marking that there was one that bounced off his chest that may hit him, sort of lace out, but maybe a bit too hard. And there were a couple of times where he just sort of missed it, but he'll get those, and he's a genuine forward and also a genuine ruck threat. So we haven't had that. We've always had that relief ruckman, not being a ruckman, and then when they're out of the ruck, they're on the forward line. I'm excited. I really like him, and we've only seen a tiny bit of what he can do.
Just a final point that even in the 16-minute quarters, George, I reckon what he gives us that no other player does is it's some tactical flexibility. So they can then use Gawn in a different way, and they can choose then to use Gawn as a weapon, either forward or back, but without him in the side. They're less likely, or they're less able to do that, to use him in a different spot to create a match-up problem or just to stretch the opposition.
Yeah, this is the value of having those two tall forwards at least, and you've got Wiedemann and Jackson who can do particularly a forward role in the ruck. It just leaves Max that kick behind play, and he doesn't have to run all over the ground.
Yeah.
So maybe that's another reason why Max is looking fitter than before, is because he's not having to cover the miles. So it's a big positive for us.
I rate Wiedemann's rucking as well, and you can have him take boundary line throw-ins down, the throw-ins in the forward, half, and if Tom McDonald was playing him too. So it doesn't have to be exposing Jackson to the sort of boundary. That's where the wrestling happens and the strength comes into it, and just keep him for the centre bounces, because no one's going to jump over the top of him.
Exactly. We'll move on to Wiedemann. Very impressive game. He led beautifully into space. He's tough in the contests. I loved it when he got absolutely poleaxed and he got straight back up and even played on. The 3 goals, which could have easily have been 4 or 5, missed a gettable 1 or 2, and he gave that one off to Jackson. Excellent game, which is exactly what we want from a key forward.
He was good, wasn't he? I was a bit when you start watching their game and watch the replay, I think, I don't know why I was worried at that stage, but I was a bit annoyed with 2 bits of play that he did. He had a beautiful kick in from, I forget who it was actually. Maybe it was the one where Cozzy had set that up to Jeddah, where he had his defender underneath the ball and just couldn't push him under it and dropped that mark. I thought that's one a good forward would swallow. And then he was a bit unlucky when I realised on the replay, but, the old rule play to the whistle when Frost of all players ran off him and went up the other end. Fortunately, that was the play where a young fella hit the post from dead in front. But for me, that was a pretty bad start. But after that, he competed super. He tackled hard. He really hit the packs well. I'm glad he got up from that sort of front-on hit that he copped, because that looked pretty nasty when it first happened. So, I couldn't have been more impressed. And the other thing was his kicking was nice as well. So, took his chances. And I just feel like he's a real confidence player, a player that sort of needs to be up and about. And if they've got him in that headspace, he can start to fulfil his potential.
That's the important thing, I think, for Wiedemann, isn't it? That headspace that... the message, obviously, from when he was dropped was you need to be putting in all the time. And in this game, that's exactly what we saw. The goals that he got were, quite frankly, quite easy, but you can't complain about that. You get easy ones sometimes. But it was the competition that he was providing up the ground and in the forward line, bringing the ball to ground, which is obviously that's what the coaches want him to do. Keep doing that. You'll get all these bonuses like he did in this game, but he's filling a great role. That initially when Tom went down, I was worried how in the hell we were going to cover. Well, they were between Jackson and Wiedemann, though he was well and truly covered in terms of our needs for this game. So big positive for Weed as well.
So I'll pose. Go ahead, B-Man.
I was just going to say one of the things that he benefited from, the whole team did, is at one point it looked like they were guarding space and there were holes everywhere. There was a kick from Harms to, of all players, Petracca, who Daisy Pearce, she must be at the ground, but must have been at the ground, I think, because she picked that Petracca was free and he was all by himself in the forward pocket and Harms picked him out. That space is how we used to be when we first started implementing the zone. If you remember, it was like, what's going on? It felt like we're always a player down, and they couldn't quite work it out. But I think that's a function of how well we were moving the ball and in those waves, and they just can't get back to create that zone properly. And that's where you get all those big holes, and it seems like there's holes everywhere. But if you think Bennell got a goal like that, Wiedemann, over the back, Wiedemann got a goal goal like that. There were a number of them that were a function of that space, and that space also means that Wiedemann can lead into it, like the one that he got. I forget who passed it to him, but he hasn't got many of them where he's leading directly into space and someone can drill it onto his chest.
I'll pose the question now, even though we'll talk changes maybe a bit later. But if Tommy Mack's fit, does he get a game? I mean, both the players that are taking up that key forward position had fairly decent games. I'd like Jackson to get a few on the trot in a row, and obviously we've got a compacted fixture coming up, so there will be time for players to have rest. But this week, does Tommy Mack get straight back in if fit? I'll start with you, George.
I'll pose the second question. Would you drop Wiedemann or Jackson?
Well, I
think the answer to that is no.
That's no, but do you play? You can't play the three talls, so.
Well, I think you can.
You can?
Yeah, I think we can, particularly this week because Brisbane have got McInerney and Steph Martin as two good rucks.
Yep.
You're not going to be able to put in. You don't want to be dragging, say, a Jackson down to fill in a second ruck role. Or you're going to need a Jackson. Sorry, you're going to need a Jackson to fill in a second ruck role. We don't want to be falling back in the old situation that we found ourselves earlier in the season of not having enough forwards left up front. So for me, at the moment, I can't see Melcham providing anything. His statistics are just appalling. He's not providing any pressure. He's had one tackle in 6 games of football in the forward 50. I don't know what else he's doing in there. Three forward seems very viable to me. Jackson had more tackles in this game than Wiedemann inside the forward 50 than what Melcham has had in the 6 games that he's played. So it's an easy one for me.
All right, big man.
Yeah. I mean, I was very critical of Melcham early on, and he's tackle and pressure down, but I don't think they'll drop him, George. I think that he played well enough to keep his spot, but I'm not sure if this is true, but there's sort of discussion about him playing some structural importance up forward in terms of helping people set it up. That seems a bit of a stretch, I would have thought. But he's, I just think, as I've said often enough, we've got such an average kicking team as a rule. It's pretty hard to get rid of a player to drop a player with his foot skills. They're playing him up the ground, but he's also not a like for Tom McDonald. And, on the question of Tom McDonald playing, I guess 2 things. There's one, that I don't like the idea of win by 40 odd points where it could have been 50 points, even if the side that you played wasn't great. You don't change much, do you? Can you play a third big? For sure you can. But I worry about Tom McDonald's mobility. And our game plan, when we talk about that running in the waves, and it's predicated partly in running up the ground in the waves, but just as importantly, running really hard to cover the outlet kick and to stop the switch. Without that, teams penetrate us. And to be honest, I think Tom McDonald's pace and his lack of mobility is a bit of a concern.
All right, we'll get more into changes a bit later. Langdon, again, reaffirms our interest in him and why we went so hard. He adds so much to the team. He just runs and he runs and he runs up and down that wing. If you rewatch the game without the angst while you're watching it at the first time, you really see how much he actually runs. Even after he delivers, he runs up the ground to provide another option for whoever's got the ball at the time. He never or rarely gets caught. He uses his pace effectively, and he always seems to just create space. Like there's a guy right on him, but he just can do an arc around and just finds that extra couple of metres. And look, his delivery isn't perfect, but I don't think it's as bad as some people on Demonland make it out to be at times. It's certainly important in getting the ball forward. George?
Yeah, totally agree. There's been 3 big additions that we've made to our team this year, and they were all playing on the weekend. There was Jackson, Pickett, and Langdon was the third one. And when you add add those three into even the 2018 team, you've got a completely different structure and options are available. The other thing that, and Binman alluded to this just then, was the ability to cut off the opposition doing the switch and getting it out the other side. When you've got someone like Langdon who can cover off that space to stop that happening, all of a sudden people wonder why Hawthorn were kicking us down the line so often. It's because they had no other options.
Yep.
You've got a fast wingman out one side and you've got a Max Gawn down the other. What do you do? Makes the opposition really, really shudder with the option. So but the other thing is Langdon he's good at getting the ball, but he's also very good at getting away from tight situations. There are a couple of situations where he was able to spin out, use his acceleration, and get the ball back into the forward line again. That's something that we were dramatic. We certainly didn't have any of last year, and probably the year before, if the truth be known, as well. So he's been fantastic.
It's a measure of how well we played in that game. I reckon that he's the 7th or 8th player we're talking about, because most weeks of footy, he'd be the first player, I reckon. He was fantastic.
Yeah.
His first game for the club, but George is spot on. He's running. Again, it's hard to see the ground, but you could see how knackered he is. He is just a running machine, and his ability also, as Andy says, to not get caught on that boundary and to spin around on it was fantastic. And I thought his kicking was fine this week. He didn't. Yeah. He hit targets. He got depth on his kick. He kicks. I don't think he had many clangers or any clangers. So
I think where I'm critical, Binman, in the kicks is that I rarely see him sort of like they kick it to sort of on the lead, lace out in front of someone's chest. But it's a minor criticism because he's getting the ball, he's getting it into the forward line, and not in a bombing it in type of way. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he has that ability on the run to sort of lace out straight at a lead's chest. I don't know, but I haven't seen that yet.
I mean, he just hasn't got the right technique. A lot of players don't have the technique. It's probably, they come into AFL and think if they haven't got the technique there, they're not going to develop it. A few players really improve heaps, some improve a bit. Just on that spread and carry, that spread and stopping the switch, George, no doubt that it's an advantage for us playing on those smaller grounds. There's no doubt at all, because it just means that we can set up our zone, but more importantly, we can cover off it better. So I'm not sure of Metricon's
I was going to ask, what are the dimensions of the games? We've got Gabba, we've got Metricon, we've got Adelaide Oval, and Tassie. No?
I haven't seen our draw yet.
We'll go into that shortly. We'll just got to finish off a few things and we'll talk about our draw, and you'll get the lowdown on that. Perhaps we can bring that up in the meantime. I'll move on. Our back line, rather than go through individuals, I think we've almost found our back six, certainly the guts of it with the three big men. Last week we mentioned having May and Omac in that frees Lever up to play his natural intercepting role. His confidence has soared in the past 2 weeks. We got lucky with O'Brien going off early, but the back line worked really well. Hibbert and Salem too. My one question mark in defence was maybe Lockhart. I was a big fan of him last year. I think this year, I don't know, I might be a bit harsh, but I think he's dropped a couple of marks and his disposal wasn't great, and he got caught a few times. Am I being harsh on Lockhart? B-Man, I might ask you first.
Oh, not harsh. I think it's funny because, you grow up watching footy, and the metric that you grow up thinking about is possessions, isn't it? And he's probably had less possessions all year than Track had in that game on the weekend. But
can't compare to Track, though, I don't think.
No, but I think that, it sounds like a cliche, but sometimes cliches are exactly that because they're true. But, all about playing their role, and his role is pressure. And personally, I think he just needs to sort of chill a bit and take a bit more time, because his pressure's fantastic. Yeah. He's a gutsy player. I think that, you've got Jetta down there. You need him almost because he's quick. He offsets Jets, who's a little bit slow, I think, these days, but had a better game, though, I thought. So I think he's safe. I think he's probably playing his role.
Yeah.
He doesn't make too many sort of really egregious errors.
No.
And it gives you another player to look at, I think, down there on your medium-sized forwards who we struggle against.
Go,
George.
Yeah, sorry. I don't have any problems with Lockhart at the moment. Unfortunately, when you're just watching this game on the television, all you see is a backman making a mistake or a forward kicking a goal. You don't see the work that's going on out
exactly.
there, and you don't see the way they're interacting with others. Lockhart will not be dropped this week. We've got Cam Rayner and Charlie Cameron to worry about.
Yes.
I don't think there are any other realistic options we've got at the moment. And I think Lockhart's also being apprenticed effectively to replace Jetta longer term as well. He's a natural footballer. He's probably a little bit short, but I think the other thing that we're seeing with the back line, talking about them, is that we're starting to see Salem being able to move more up the ground.
Getting released.
We saw even... getting released. Jetta was even at one point threatening to kick a goal. So this whole back line, not just the 6, but probably 8 players in total, coming on and off the ground, is remarkably well set. I think this is what we're going to see for the rest of the season. I couldn't fault anything that was going on down there. Got May and Lever who are doing exactly what they're being paid for, and with Oscar in there, as I describe him as a goalkeeper, it enables those two to do their job. No questions, no qualms about what was going on down there.
Yeah, Oscar's played some of the best games I've seen him play in the last couple of weeks. Again, had disposal efficiency was up in the 90%, and he's just sort of he's spoiling and just being in the right spot. He's pretty good, and his disposal as well out of the back line as a rebounder at times was great too.
And in that coverage, I don't know whether they're down cameras or something, because they've got some funny camera angles they have, and one of them they kept on having was sort of an angle down the line one, but it showed what I sort of that point I've been making about him playing at the back of that diamond and that deep, as George says, that goalkeeper, where he plays that deep player back, which again saved us a goal where he was able to get back and touch that ball. And I don't know whether Max is winding him up. I suspect he might. I heard Max Gawn interviewed on that captain's run thing on RSN this morning, and he was saying he's the general back there. He's he was pumping him up as the general, and I suspect he might have been having a bit of a dig at Oscar, but he's definitely playing better. More aggressive. He did my favourite my favourite Oscar play was he spoiled, I think it was Burgoyne, about 30 metres out from their goal. And I watched this on this AFL Pro function. He then followed the ball all the way up the ground, and we maintained possession all the way up the ground. And there was a handball chain between Langdon and another player, and it went back to Oscar, who got it just over the wing and kicked that 60-metre kick to set up Petracca to the goal to Fritsch. It was just fantastic that he got the spoil, saved the goal at one end, but had the fitness at the end of a game that was deep in the last quarter to run all the way past the wing and deliver a 60-metre kick. And that's good footy.
Yeah, it is. And I just had in my notes here, and you sort of touched on it earlier, Big Man, just about the defensive zones clearly working, because if you look at our opposition scores this year, sides are really struggling to score against us, providing we don't turn it over, which in the past has been a concern for us, but I think last couple of weeks, not as much. Another thing, our accuracy in front of goal has certainly improved. 14 goals, 7, I believe we kicked. It's been 7 goals, 14 last 2019 for sure. So that's pleasing too. Another thing that I had written down, it was really pleasing for me that when Hawthorn started getting some confidence and momentum earlier in the third quarter, that we were able to respond and not only stem the flow but to stop the bleeding completely. There are a lot of people in the live Demonland thread with the comments of, oh, here we go, which I think I might have said that as well, because we've seen teams be able to run over the top of us, and I had that worry, but that wasn't there this week. I was very pleased to see us sort of be able to stop that and not let them run all over the top of us, because at one stage it looked like they could have.
We've seen that a couple of times now, haven't we, during the season?
Sorry, what was that, George?
We've seen that a couple of times during the season where teams have come back and we've just held on, whereas certainly in years gone by it would have been, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
So that's a great sign of confidence, but also the confidence in your own abilities to pull it out of the fire when needed. So can only be another positive.
Big man.
Sorry, George. It's interesting you say that, because when you direct messaged me before to see whether I could come on the podcast, I was thinking about the game and what my highlights were, and of course Max and Track were right up there. But for me, that was my highlight. That was my biggest highlight of the game. Was not that we stopped them, but really how we did it. And I think that harks back to the discussion at the beginning of tonight about our tactical shift, is that what we're able to do was to get the momentum, to stop their momentum first, and we did that with tempo football. And one of the I think we didn't get a goal, and maybe it was Wiedemann, at least 6, 7, 8 minutes into that quarter. So they got their first 2 goals within 3 or 4 minutes, and then we took the speed out of the game and controlled it. Even after May took that screamer, which was another highlight of the game, he's gone past a Melbourne player would have attacked off that half-back line and gone quick and tried to get that goal back to get our margin out. He didn't. He calmed down and went sideways, and that tempo took the wind out of their sails, which meant that when we did get the goal to go to 4 goals, to go back to 4 goals up, the quarter was more than half done by that stage, and really that was the game right there. So that for me was the highlight, because as George said, it showed maturity, and it was something that we did well against Carlton. We balanced up, and we did super the previous week against the Suns when they came at us. And yeah, I couldn't have been more impressed with that, but particularly about how they did it.
Yep. We talked about sort of changes, but can you see any other changes being made, T-Mac aside? Anyone to come in to match up with Brisbane?
What was the discussion on D? I just caught a little bit of it about Vandenberg being injured.
Well, so there was a poster today had mentioned something. Didn't really say that he's injured, but he's injured in a way. But he didn't frame it as an injury. He said he was played with it might have happened during the game with a fractured cheekbone, but he didn't come back in, I don't believe, to follow up on that. And nothing was mentioned. Melbourne released their Burgess report, said we got through the game unscathed, unless they're hiding that from Brisbane. I don't know.
I would have thought with a fractured cheekbone, if that was true, that there's no chance at all he'd be playing this week. In which case, why would they cover it up? It'd just be a fact of life. So,
well, fractured cheekbone, you put a plate in, don't you? So
yeah, but you're going to be out for a couple of weeks, and then the plate usually has to come out again. So
yeah. Maybe it was a typo and he meant that he fractured someone else's cheekbone.
The guy who posted it has had good mail in the past. I just sort of went through it because I sort of remembered his name, and he was one of the guys who had mentioned how it hasn't been announced yet, but all the other players who were hubbing in Melbourne, so to speak, were left in Melbourne, the Pruses, right, the Bedfords, those guys, that they were all going up to the Gold Coast to await our team joining them there. And I think there was some other thing that he had mentioned. So he's had some good mail in the past. So his post was, guys, it hasn't been reported yet, but to show you how tough and committed to the cause that Aaron is, he suffered a triple fracture to his cheekbone early in the second quarter. And despite blood trickling continually down the inside of his nose and throat, he totally downplayed the knock and kept playing, and you wouldn't have known he'd had that if that's the case. Was even the only player to go in and remonstrate with Stratton after the crude knock on Weed. You could see why the coaches and teammates love him in the side. So that's all he said. He hasn't mentioned whether the guy's going to miss or there's a chance to miss or he's having surgery. So there was none of that information given, and then nothing from the club either. So
who's the poster?
Goodwin D's.
Yeah.
He's had a couple of good mail stuff. So
he has, yeah.
Nothing huge, but not like just that. Someone trolling coming on and saying some nonsense.
I wouldn't disregard that info at all.
So I believe the info, but a triple fractured cheekbone. That's serious, and you would think Melbourne would have said something rather than hiding something. If that's the case, I don't know. And I think
you play through it.
Is it like, can you be half pregnant? Can you play sort of pregnant, sort of fractured? I don't know. We'll see. Watch this space. So I don't know. But barring no injuries, because Burgess did say we got through unscathed. Any other changes you can see to match up with Brisbane?
I can't see any realistically. My one about Melksham would be the only one, but to bring Tom in, but can't see any other. Can't see a need for any others. The backs are pretty well covered. Let's hope Hipwood doesn't pull 5 out of his bottom again.
Yeah. Who played on him last time? Was Petty was playing that time? I remember there was that was the game I think where May and Frost sort of had the bit of that argument at one stage. So we definitely had Petty and Frost back there. So the team will look a lot different with Lever, Omac, and not sure if Lever played that day.
The player that must be feeling like wonder whether they'll get back in his Rivers, because I can't, like George, I can't see a change being made. I don't know why you'd sort of what their motivation would be. Maybe Tom McDonald in, but then you're going to lose someone. So maybe Vandenberg comes out for Tom McDonald, which wouldn't be too bad a sort of swap, I guess. They're not quite like for like, but obviously, they've got 3 bigs, haven't they, the Lions? But Rivers was hopeful to be getting a game, before the end of the season again, of course.
He'll definitely get a game, and look, I think we'll go into it now. We've got our fixture for the next 4 weeks after the Brisbane game has been released, the round 9 to round 12. I believe, including the Brisbane game, we're playing 5 games in 20 days. So we've got this week, and then round 9 we play Port at the Gabba on Thursday the 30th of July. So that's coming off a how many day break? We've got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we've got that 4-day break.
At what time is that game?
They're all TBC time, but I'm assuming if it's Thursday, it'll be evening. Then round 10, we go to Adelaide to play Adelaide at Adelaide Oval. I'm hoping that they get a win before then. I really don't want to play Adelaide not having a win. That's my veil of negativity coming down for this week.
If you saw Adelaide play,
I know
you wouldn't worry about it.
I know, but I'm thinking 2019 Demons, anything can happen. Hopefully that's not the case. So we've got Adelaide. That's on the Wednesday, the 5th of August. So we get that 6-day break after the Thursday game. But we do have to travel. So I'm assuming it'll be a fly in, fly out. But because it's probably Wednesday, do you reckon they're playing those during the day? They couldn't. That would have to be at night, wouldn't it? For the broadcasters, if nothing else. Yeah. So it's at least it's not a day game where they have to get up at 5 a.m, fly in, fly out type of thing. So because I imagine they will fly in, fly out. I don't imagine they'd stay the night there. but I'm not sure what the deal with interstate travel. Round 11, we go to Tasmania. So another interstate trip. That's on a Sunday. So I'm assuming that will be during the day.
What a happy hunting ground Tasmania for us over the last few years.
Which one's Blundstone Arena?
Hobart.
Is that the one we usually play them at?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Where the wind blows sideways.
Yeah. So we've got that on a Sunday. That might be a fly in, fly out, but I believe North Melbourne. I think someone said where are they in Maroochydore as well? Are they based there? So at least we'll probably be on the same plane with them in and out. So both of us have a similar thing. That's on the Sunday after the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that's another 4-day break. And someone's posted later on. I'll go into that of what our oppositions, what their breaks are like before we play them. After that is the round 12 game against Collingwood at the Gabba on a Saturday. I would assume that'll probably be Saturday night. As I said, they haven't mentioned times yet, but you'd think they'd put Melbourne Collingwood that night for the broadcast. Could be during the day, but I don't know. Would have liked that to have been a Friday night game. But this we've got a 6-day break between the game before. But and the reason I say Friday night game is because just to give us a blockbuster.
Yeah, but in that case, Collingwood would be off a 3-day break.
No, who cares about that?
I think that's going to happen.
Okay.
So that schedule is that, not that I'm superstitious at all, but touch wood or anything that's wooden around me, that we've got a pretty good run with injury except for Vandenberg at the moment. And that's going to play a part. And one of the benefits of having played different players already, quite a few players have played this season despite our few injuries, is that all things being equal, have a good list to choose from, whereas some other clubs are not so lucky at the moment. So that might be helpful.
So just to go through what our opponents have to do, Deco2 on Demonland has said it's tough on the travel for us, but harder for our opponents. So the round 9 versus Port Adelaide sees us travelling, coming off a 4-day break after the Brisbane game. Port get a 5-day break, but are travelling from Adelaide. He reckons that's about even between the two of us because of that. Round 10 versus Adelaide sees us travelling to Adelaide off a 6-day break. Adelaide are coming off a 4-day break travelling from Brisbane. He's rated that a win for us. Round 11 versus North sees us travelling to Tasmania off a 4-day break. North are also coming off a 4-day break travelling from Brisbane, but they play in Brisbane the week before. But if they're coming from Maroochydore, then both of us off a 4-day break. Coming from the same place on the same plane, that's even. But then again, they know that ground probably better than us. Round 12 versus the Pies sees us travelling to Brisbane, down from Maroochydore, off a 6-day break. Pies coming off a 4-day break travelling from Adelaide the week before. So there you go.
That's not too bad. That's not too bad at all. If the North Melbourne Melbourne game ends in a draw, perhaps they could have like a table tennis championship back at their at Maroochydore to decide the winner.
Here's what I don't like about this latest block that's been released. Lucifer's Hero has posted, have a look at Essendon's thing. Now, remember, we're yet to play our make-up game against Essendon. That's probably come in the next block. And considering that a lot of the other teams are getting their buys in this block, in various rounds of these blocks, and we're obviously not getting the buy because it's been considered that we've already had it. Essendon are playing round 9 at the Gabba, round 10 at Metricon, round 11 at Metricon, and round 12 at the Gabba. All with fairly good breaks. They've got a 7-day break. They got it better than us, and they they don't have to travel at all. They're based in I think if they go to in round 8, they go to Adelaide, as in this week. But other than that, they've got the next 4 weeks after that in Queensland where they're based. So not very.
Another way to look at that, Andy, is what happens to the psychology. Don't they say that teams bond when they're travelling? At what point when they're in a hub does that kick in, the benefit of travelling? And maybe the Bombers will be a little bit sort of at home and not get that same benefit.
Possibly, I don't know. But I must say the hub life has been great for us at the moment. Hopefully we've now moved up to Queensland, so hopefully that continues. And I think you mentioned in the chat room before that because we're in Maroochydore, what's the facilities out there? We got 2 MCG size ovals available to us.
Yeah, we're training, as I understand it, we're training on the grounds that we train on when we do our pre-season camp. That's what I think is the case, in which case they're perfect. They're 2 beautiful ovals. I remember the footage of them. They're both exactly the same dimensions, and I think they're MCG dimensions. And they've got a gym between the 2 of them, or the side. It looks fantastic. I presume I don't know whether they had a choice in it, but it wouldn't surprise me at all, because they've been up there for the last 3 years. They're staying in the same accommodation and training at the same grounds, that it sort of makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
And the other thing is that with all the other teams that are around the Gold Coast and Brisbane, that there's actually not a great number of AFL facilities available. So if we're just that little bit further out with good facilities and conditions, I think that'll be a positive, as opposed to trying to share a ground or share a facility with another club. Not worried about the bit of extra travel time. It's only an hour or 2 more than what others will be doing.
No, and the other thing, I mean, they say for elite athletes that one of the biggest challenges for the team is the break in routines. And even though it's a small thing, there's a bit of a routine ever in that same spot, but they're familiar with it. They know that's that place where they share rooms and they cook and all of that stuff up there. They've got a gym at the Twin Towers or whatever it's called. So, those little things help, I think, in terms of, it's not an unfamiliar space. It's probably a great space for they've got their family and kids up there. And by all accounts, Maroochydore is a pretty quiet place, so it's not like they're likely to get out in trouble. And who knows? I guess they could find a way. But
that's pretty important. I think from the players' personal perspective, I think having their families in facilities, it's not just a hotel room. They're able to get out and about. They've got much more space themselves, especially if you've got a couple of kids, as some players have got. You wouldn't want to be sitting inside a hotel room in the middle of Brisbane, which other players are doing at the moment. So,
exactly.
A little bit of extra time.
Exactly. They're like, from memory, I remember the footage of them where they had shots from inside. They're like sort of little apartments. So, I think that, presumably they had a choice in it.
Yeah, and it's at a resort, so I think they've got the whole resort to themselves, or maybe sharing it with another club, I think maybe North. So, I'm sure there's lots of space and a big pool and the like. The ground sizes we talked about before, so the MCG is 160 by 141. Where we just played the last couple of games was 164, so 4 metres longer, but it's 123, so quite a lot narrower than the G. So that's the last 2 weeks we've been playing at. The Metricon is the same length as the G, but it's 134 as opposed to 141, so it's a little bit narrower. Gabba is a bit shorter, 156 metres, and a little bit wider than Metricon, but still a bit smaller than the MCG, which we've struggled on the MCG, so it's not a bad thing. And then I guess where's the Blundstone Arena? Blundstone Arena, in terms of length, is 175 as opposed to the G 160 metres long, so it's a lot longer ground. 133.
I think they did that deliberately. They lengthened it to allow for Brown's run up when he kicks it.
Yes.
Mind you, the way Brown's playing, he can run up all he likes.
Yeah, I was wondering if Melbourne are sharing accommodation with him, maybe they could throw him a big beach ball and see, if he can grab that.
Then Adelaide Oval, which we're also playing at, is 167, so it's 7 metres longer than the G, but obviously 123, so a lot narrower. So look, I think those grounds will probably suit us, but we'll see. Anything else, boys?
What do you think about holding the ball this week? It seems to have changed again.
George, before we go on, just a fixture, and we will go on to that because it's a dog's breakfast between games, that one. But just quickly, the fixtures, the remaining games that we have to play. Obviously, we've got to play Essendon. We'll probably play them whether it's the Gabba or Metricon. It'll be one of those, but. We'll have to play Sydney at some stage, and I think we'll probably have to go to Sydney for that one. That's my tip. The other one is Freo. We won't have to go to Perth, but I reckon we'll play at the Northern Territory at least one game. So my tip is we'll play them there. Who else haven't we played?
Essendon.
Well, that's what I say. Essendon, Sydney, Freo. Is there one other? Who else?
We haven't played Dogs yet, or Saints.
Yeah, Dogs or Saints. They're the other ones. So likely we'll play them at the. So we won't have to travel. We'll have to probably travel the Northern Territory, and I reckon we'll have to travel to Sydney. Sydney to play Sydney. Unless the AFL throw us a bone and give us that game in Queensland, but yeah, that's how the rest of the year will probably look.
It's going to be
games are better at Metricon. That looks fantastic. That ground on the television. It's the only one that the grass looks any half decent on.
Yep. Well, we'll get to see that this week.
It's a magnificent ground. It's going to be interesting to see how it holds up with all the games that are being played there. But yeah, the times that I've been up there, it's like a billiard table. Magnificent ground, and certainly very pleasant up there during the middle of winter to be playing on. So, but I think we've got, in terms of the fixture, we've got it's all on the line over even for this round. We haven't played the top 3 teams yet, but also we haven't played the bottom 4 teams. And at some point, if we're serious about getting into finals, we've got to start beating those teams who are either ahead of us on the ladder, to get sufficient number of wins to get into the finals. And this game against Brisbane, I think, has got a lot riding on it from that perspective. Well, we beat them, and also we've sort of started to bank a game here or there. Very important for us this round.
We've got 2 tough games coming up because we've got Brisbane and then we've got Port. So we're playing the two top teams basically this year. We really need to win at least one of them. Obviously, we'd like to win both of them, but definitely have to win one of them. I think it's important, particularly with finals prospects. And obviously, we don't want to drop the games against those teams that have been underperforming this year. Adelaide, North, and then we've got
Sydney,
and we've got Collingwood coming up as well. And then it'll be interesting, well, depending on what happens in those, when we play teams that are the Bulldogs, St Kilda, who might be sort of on our level thereabouts, and Essendon too. So, yep, ours are there for the taking for us. And, if we play like we did on the weekend, but there's no reason why we can't do it. But
and just on that, I think that in 2018, what we did well was we did beat those teams around us. But that was partly because I think that if we can play at the intensity that we played on the weekend, we're very, very hard to beat for a team that's not as good as us. That's where those stronger teams have an advantage, because a team like Collingwood, for instance, have they do have more skilled players across the ground, and if they are also capable capable of bringing the same sort of intensity as we bring. So I really rate Brisbane. So it's going to be a tough game this week, and it will be a really good barometer to see where we're at. I think a real positive for this game is that we're underdogs. I think that's a really good headspace for them to be in. I think the odds are 220 or 215, so not overwhelming underdogs, but they're expected to win this Brisbane, so the pressure will be on them. And for me, they feel a bit like our benchmark team. We were well above them in 2018. They were super last year and have looked pretty good this year, but I think we should, if we're tracking well enough, we should be beating Brisbane.
George, you wanted to talk about the holding the ball rule. It's been very inconsistent across matches, and sometimes even within a game. It baffles me at times. What do you want to say about that?
I just don't know where it's going with it at the moment. I saw today that the umpires representative called up Brett Ratton and apologised for some of the decisions made in their game. I'm in favour of the idea. I can see that they're trying to make sure that the ball gets pushed out and not fallen on and covered up and held, because that creates a much better game to watch. It's just the inconsistencies that are occurring between individual umpires, and you never know what's going to come out of a whistle decision, but hopefully they can get it right very soon. But yeah, I certainly like the idea of getting the ball out more often than has been in the past. I just can't stand the ball up after ball up after ball up with 36 players standing around it. That's not what we want to see. So I was just interested in what you guys thought about it.
On that, I agree with that point. That I think it actually has been quite effective. Players aren't. The one that has been more effective, I think, is dragging it in. That's the one that I'd pay. I personally hate it when a player gets driven into the ground and is given holding the ball against him. I just can't stand it. But it's that one where, like, Fritsch had the Hawk player with the ball underneath him, and they're the ones that should be paid. If you bring it in, it's your responsibility to get it out, even if you can't, even if physically you stop. I'm all for that one, and I agree. And players are looking to get it out in that circumstance now. But for me, the inconsistency was summed up when Scully got caught by Viney and had plenty of time to get rid of it. And the umpire, Mike, captured the umpire saying, he didn't have chance to possession or something. He had plenty of time to get rid of it. And less than 20 seconds, the next ball up, 10 seconds later, someone got tackled who had less time than him.
Yeah, and got the free. Yep.
Got pinged.
Yep. I thought the umpire was that was one of those classic umpire was making up for the free kick that he didn't give 2 seconds earlier. Had to have been.
I assume it was the same umpire.
It was exactly the same umpire.
So what?
Yeah.
So that's where, as you said, George, that's what drives all fans nuts, is that inconsistency, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, I just, for me, prior opportunity is a huge thing. As you said, man, the players that deliberately bring it back in and make no effort to get it out, they're the big ones for me. I don't like these ones where they've got no prior opportunity, they get jumped on, there's no possible way they could do anything, and then they get pinged. It makes no sense to me. And
then what's his name? If for some reason or other he shits me, but he just beats us all the time. I can't even remember his name. Who's number 19 for Hawthorn? The guy he kicked at 60 metres. Gunston dropped the ball in that third quarter.
And they got a goal. They got a goal 2 seconds later.
They got a goal out of it. That had to be dropping the ball. That's what you can't stand. Is
they're
when
the
a
ones.
perfectly laid tackle by Lockhart doesn't get the result. They score a goal. It's a goal they shouldn't have got because it was clear dropping the ball. And then they, a second later they'll pay a Ticky Touchwood one. So
for me, it's those things. It's often the free kicks that aren't paid more so than I guess some of the ones that are paid baffle me too. But definitely those ones that aren't paid really can end up costing you because play on go. It's called play on, and they got a goal out of it, and they really should not have got that goal.
Yeah, I want the umpires department to maybe, for instance, if you could get them on Demonland to apologise to every Demon fan for all of the rubbish free kicks that we've suffered over the years.
We might have to compile a long list, but that'll involve a lot of going over games I don't care to watch again. So I don't think that's going to happen. And Before we wrap things up, anything you want to bring up before we go? Any final words?
Highlight for me on the weekend was just a huge highlight was the facial expressions of Frawley, who when that the kick from track and then the kick to Weed later in the game when he got beaten on the lead, and at halftime I think it was when he was in Gawn's face. I think that was priceless. The constant cutaways to Clarkson, who was melting down in the box, was fantastic. And as George noted earlier, that expression on Sicily's face when he just could not move track under the ball. 99 times out of 100, he gets a player in that position and the ball sat on the forward's head. He just pushes him under and takes that mark.
Yep.
He just looks so utterly defeated.
Yep.
So yeah, that was my highlight for the weekend.
George, anything else from you?
Nothing else from me. That was a very pleasant week, and let's hope we have a similar pleasant week next week.
I absolutely agree. All right, thank you, boys. Thank you, Bin Man, for joining us as a co-host tonight. Hopefully, your success of calling into the program isn't ruined. You calling in and then us winning isn't ruined by you actually co-hosting tonight. I will blame you if we do lose you. You'll be the first one that gets a call from me. But thank you for joining us, George. Thank you. We'll be back next week, hopefully talking about a fantastic win on the Gold Coast.
Go Red Legs.
Go D's.